there is quite an interesting event which has led to a lot of discussion among scholars, but also is very relevant to many Buddhists, which is that at a certain point, there is the country of Kosala, the country of Magadha, which was one of the countries of it, which now is part of present-day North India. And Magadha wanted to take over the northern small states in the north, which are now part of Nepal. And they found it quite hard to do that because these countries were very well organized. And so this was quite an interesting decision. So the king of Magadha sent a representative to the Buddha to ask him what they should do with these small states in the north, and how they should take over those countries. Of course, the Buddha was not interested in giving him any suggestions for warfare, and that was not what the Buddha was into. But the Buddha did use that opportunity to talk to his students about why those countries in the north were so difficult to conquer. And then he talks about a culture. He took use of that occasion, he made use of that occasion, that opportunity to expand on how Buddhists, and also in more general sense, everybody who wants to build a good society, how they should go ahead, how they should continue to keep the good traditions and the good society alive after the Buddha's passing. And this is very much connected with the idea of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is very important in Buddhism, and every teaching in Buddhism concerning the practice, it always comes back to these 8 steps, which are basically about, well, you can see it here. It's about a view of our lives, the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act, and our occupation, the job that we choose. Sometimes we don't choose our jobs, but still there is a certain choice in there. There's a certain moment where we choose how to do our job. And then there is effort, which is about how we develop our habits. Mindfulness and concentration, or in other words, meditation, they come at the end of the circle, and they are really about our mind. So if you want to summarize this is a very important Eightfold Path, and it summarizes all of the Buddhist teachings. There is no single Buddhist teaching that does not fit into this Eightfold Path in some way, shape, or form. But you cannot, if you find that it's kind of a lot to process all at once, you can also summarize the Eightfold Path in a very simple way through 3 trainings. First of all, the training of the ethical life, meaning our actions, our words, the things that we do, and to be mindful of our actions and words. The training of the mind, which is the way we train our mind in meditation and with developing habits and good qualities of the heart and mind. And then training our wisdom, our understanding of life and the world, which helps us to be a better person and be more realistic. So this is something you find again and again in Buddhism, and you can see from this simple skeleton, this simple framework, which is the essence of Buddhism, and it's the first teaching the Buddha ever gave, that it's very universal in nature. There isn't a single part of the Eightfold Path where the Buddha talks about becoming Buddhist, for example. There isn't a single moment in the Eightfold Path where the Buddha talks about now you have to go to the temple. Of course, for many Buddhists, that is very essential to establish, to do this Eightfold Path, but it's not literally in there. That is, it's very universal in nature. So the Buddha always talked in a very universal way trying to appeal to a very wide audience. So even the idea of the culture of the awakened ones, or developing a great culture, developing a good society, in a more general sense, you can find this in many Buddhist teachings. So what did the Buddha say in that moment, that strange moment when one of the ministers, when one of the representatives of that king, asked the Buddha, how can I defeat that country in the north, the Lichavis, and the Vajjins. So the Vajjins was, as I just mentioned, it was a little country in the north, current-day Nepal, and they wanted to conquer it. And the Buddha, he didn't respond directly, but he said, you know why this country is so great? Because it has a number of foundations. And if you develop these foundations in any society, in any community, that community will prosper. In fact, he said, if you develop just one single foundation of those 7 foundations, the community will prosper. So you don't even have to mention all 7 if you develop those. And so when we talk about this, these are things that are about the community in its entirety. So we aren't talking just about ourselves, but we're talking about how to develop a good community together. But of course, we start with ourselves. But you can see that these teachings go a little farther than just the individual. So the first thing the Buddha says, they are this very good society, very prosperous and very harmonious society. It has regular and frequent assemblies, meaning that people often come together. There is unity. And he continues on that, and he says people meet in harmony, they break up in harmony. That is, they start together, and when the meeting is finished, they leave together, and they carry on their business in harmony. Now, you might say, well, I've just been talking about the foundations of a harmonious society, and then I just say the word harmony a lot. Well, it goes a little farther than that. I'll just explain in a moment. Then the Buddha says, a good society does not authorize what has not been authorized already, and doesn't abolish what has been authorized, but sticks to ancient tradition. There may be a bit of question here, because this is it sounds a bit conservative, but that this is very important to look into. So I'll just explain in a moment. And he then also says that in order to have a good society, you need to honor, respect, revere, and salute your elders, and consider them worth listening to. In fact, there was I think it was a philosopher who said that the value of any society is right there in how we take care of our elders, how we take care of the older people. And if you see that the older people are not properly taken care of, then there is going to be problems in that society. Let me talk a little bit more in detail now. Why is it important to come together often and carry the meetings out in unity? So when you talk about a temple, or you talk about any community, it's important to have a sort of shared stewardship. So stewardship is actually a term from the Bible, but it's also very important in Buddhism, which means that you take care of that you are owners together. So in the temple, in the Buddhist temple, you can see this often, that this is a very important part of the culture. For example, Kunyai, you remember Kunyai, right? The nun who founded our temple in Thailand. She would often say that everybody should feel they have part in the Buddhist temple. She said, everybody who comes to temple should be like a sort of employee, or should be like, not an employee, what is the word? Should be like a sort of part of the staff. That was what she said. Part of the staff. So even if people are just very new to the temple, then there should be a process of trying to get everybody involved. So if you go to our temple in Thailand, you would see that there are many ceremonies in which everybody has a share. So if there is any foundation piles being built for some kind of building, then everybody will work together in that ceremony, through some ceremony, to make the foundations. And this kind of examples, there are many of them. So to work together and to have a sort of shared stewardship. So this is very important. If we look at modern day politics, this is often lacking. We don't see it often. People will just be concerned with trying to eliminate the other side, whether it's left or right-wing politics. So you just see, looking at the other side of the story, you can see that in politics, people don't have this sense of stewardship so much anymore. There isn't really a sense that people want to protect and take care of society at all costs. So not to mention the shared creativity, which might be lacking then. So this is in Buddhist temples, you see this a lot. When there is a ceremony or when there is any activity together, then everybody will contribute together. One person will do this, the other person will do that. Everybody can contribute together. And eventually this leads to a shared willingness to protect that initiative, to protect that temple, to protect that community in a good way, in a wise way. So this is very important. Now, in a country, it's the same thing. Whether you're talking about Buddhist temple or any country, it's the same thing. You have to have this shared sense of stewardship. You want to take care of the country yourself together. So when we talk about how to fix polarization, how to fix all these problems that we have in the present day, it's all about finding common ground. And what do we have in common? And there's a lot of a negative talk, especially in Europe, about nationalism. And nationalism can be very dangerous. But I think, and I've seen this also in the writings of many philosophers in the present day, whether left-wing or, even left-wing philosophers have written about this, that it's good to have some form of nationalism which is constructive, in which you take care of the community and you help to develop it together. That is, maybe you don't want to call it nationalism, maybe you want to just call it a healthy love for your country, for your community. That is very good to have that. And that is very clear in these teachings where the Buddha talks about this: holding regular and frequent assemblies, meeting in harmony, breaking up in harmony, and carrying on your business in harmony. So this doing things in a shared way is very important. So even though there are maybe many differences, you find some common ground and you find you can work together. So when I became a monk in the Thai temple 20 years ago, it was very difficult sometimes for me to work and to live together with many people that have very different habits and different culture, different upbringing. But because we have these shared ideals together, I came there believing and finding a lot of inspiration, support, and wisdom in the Buddhist teaching. So when we have this together, the color of the skin or the origins, the culture, it becomes less important. But what becomes more important is what the ideals you share together. So then talking about not to authorize what has not been authorized already. What is that about? Oh, sorry. Why do we have to stick to tradition, as the Buddha would talk about that? Why did the Buddha talk about that? Well, it's important that when you take care of the society, when you keep the community alive, you want to develop the community in its spiritual ways, but also make it a harmonious community, then you look at all the values and norms that you already have, and you look at how can you further develop those. So do not always reinvent the wheel completely, and don't throw out your constitution. So in the Buddhist, this idea of constitution is actually not completely modern, or at least the idea of laws, and that you have something that you stick to. So in the Buddhist commentaries, it's actually mentioned, explained. This point is actually explained in exactly that way. It said that the Vajjians, the society that the Buddha was talking about, they had many laws, they had many processes, and they very much stuck to those processes. They would not, for example, if somebody was arrested and they would be brought to a judge, then there would be many processes, many laws, and many steps before somebody would be found guilty. And that may sound very modern, but it's actually literally mentioned in the Buddhist text as being a characteristic of that society. So the Buddha is basically saying these people, they stuck to the traditions, the good traditions. They didn't reinvent the wheel, and they stuck to what is important principles and Dhamma. Dhamma meaning goodness and what is right. So I think this is a very good debate that we should often have, because whether it's about politics or whether it's any part of our society, there will always be discussions about how can we make it better, but there should also be discussions about how can we keep the things that are already good. And that's why we have conservative and progressive politics. And there should be a debate between the two, not a fight. So that is not only in politics, but also in any part of society. When we stop talking to each other, then we are no longer living in harmony. And that's when things get wrong. So why do we stick to tradition? So we don't reinvent the wheel and we don't throw out our constitution. Then the Buddha, he also talks about to honor our elders. Now, this is not only elders because of age, but it also refers to elders because of experience and because of their responsibility, people who we honor. Maybe it's just because they have good character. That can also be. People who are worthy of honoring, and then we honor these people and we consider them worth listening to. We are loyal to those people. So this is very often mentioned in the Buddhist text. And actually you can see here that if I just go back one more time, you can see here there's 4 words that are mentioned here: to honor, respect, revere, and salute. And that is not a random, those are not random synonyms. They are not just a poetic list of words or something like that, but they are actually different parts of respect. So you can find this as an important part of Buddhist culture when we are dealing with people who we respect for their knowledge, their experience, or their age, or maybe their responsibilities. Then there is the aspect of showing respect and to know respect. And that when we think of the word respect, sometimes we think of something like something we have to do, or something that we are forced on, that we have been forced to do. It has kind of a negative meaning sometimes these days, or sometimes it's like a word that we criticize other people, like that person doesn't have respect, or the youth no longer has respect, or something like that. But respect in Buddhism is mostly about a sort of awareness of other people's good qualities. And this is a very important part of it. So respect in the ancient language of India, where they use the word karu, or it comes from the word karu. Karawa comes, that is the word for respect, and it comes from the word karu, meaning heavy. It means something like you are aware, you are holding on to something. Now I'm talking about ancient Indian language, okay? Maybe it's not in the present day, it's maybe different, but this is how I was trained in the ancient Indian language. So these are 4 words that are mentioned in the Buddhist texts, and they are about different kinds of respect. There is the part where you show respect. I think in Asia, this is very much emphasized. In the West, not so much, especially since the French Revolution, we kind of threw a lot of that out of the window. But it's important to have ways that we can show respect, to have traditions and days and moments that we can show respect. And in the Buddhist tradition, there is also the custom of showing material respect by having certain objects like flowers or candles. You show respect to certain people. And even just showing respect to your elders, to your parents, is often sometimes people will bring certain objects, will bring clothes or bring flowers to their parents or something like that. Puja means showing physical respect, like many Buddhist traditions have a form of bowing or showing respect in other ways through your body. This is all very important, but it's also important to have the mental part. I think in the West, we emphasize the knowing respect a lot, and sometimes in Asia, this part is sometimes omitted or forgotten. People, sometimes they forget about the more mental part of respect. So for example, in Thailand, there is a lot of cultures and a lot of traditions in showing respect. But then when you look online, people, very harsh criticism, they talk in a very harsh way because they are anonymous. And that is sometimes, it shows that the mental respect isn't really there. It's just an outside respect, but not inside. So there's a mental part as well, and it comes from the mind and the heart. Manana is kind of like this awareness where you are mentally aware of another person's good qualities. And karukara means that you respect in another person from your heart. You are loyal to that person. You want to take care of that person. You want to make sure that that person is well and healthy, and you also want to devote yourself to that person. So these are things that are very common in Buddhist tradition, in spiritual tradition. But the Buddha here isn't just talking about elders in the spiritual sense. He is talking about showing respect to all elders. So it's also for older people in general. You can try to find ways to show respect and find things that they may be able to talk about that are worth listening to. And often that is the case. There is a lot of things that we can learn from the older generation. They have been here in this world before us, and they have seen a lot and heard a lot where we don't really know much about. These are the last 3 of the 7 foundations of Buddhist culture. The 5th one may be a bit odd, so let me explain. The Buddha here says this part of the culture is not to forcibly abduct others' wives and daughters and compel them to live with you. Now you might say, well, that kind of makes sense. Why would you do that in the first place? But that's because in those days, it was not uncommon. That would happen sometimes. But if you look at another text in which the Buddha explains this same set of teachings to the monks, and he explains that this item is about how our mind works. Because in those days, when wives and daughters were abducted, was not only showing a lack of respect for women, but it was also showing too much emphasis on political ambition. And so you kind of force women to live with you in order to connect with another family or something like that. or sometimes because you would like to fight with another family, with another clan. So this is the sort of thing that the Buddha was cautious and afraid of, that he didn't want people to victimize women in order to fulfill some sort of political ambition, or to, in other words, just not to respect women. So in this point, you can see that that the Buddha talks about how important it is to respect women in any society, and also to be not to have any hidden ambitions, or to have some sort of way that you want something in the wrong way. So then the Buddha ends with two items, and they are similar, but not quite the same. He says to honor, respect, revere, and salute. So those are the same four words again. So we can see here the words again. So that is sakara and manana and karukara, showing here the forms of respect, the ways we can show respect and no respect. But here it doesn't refer to elders, but it refers to shrines. What does he mean? Is it like a shrine, like a little shrine which you see at the side of the road with Mary or Jesus or something? This is a shrine here is a bit of an odd translation. Actually, the Buddha is talking about stupas, or more generally, meditation centers or temples. In other words, it's for any society and any community to prosper, it's important to have a place where you can spiritually develop. And it's important to maintain that place. In Buddhist culture, we have a temple for several ways, for several reasons. First of all, it's a place for education, a place where the monks practice themselves and educate the community, a center of society, a center of culture. You can see this very strongly in Thailand, maybe to a lesser extent in the West, but you can still see that many Buddhist temples contribute to education, and many meditation centers think that is also very important to really contribute to the education, but it will be an education of the heart, not just of the mind. And it's also a place, and this is mostly in Asia, the temple is also a place to accumulate good karma, a place where we can do good deeds and contribute to work together and do good things, to community work. And more importantly, in Thai language, the word temple is wat, and wat also means to measure. So it's a place where you can measure and get to know yourself. It's a place where you can overcome negative emotions and unrealistic perceptions of yourself. You can get to know yourself better. The thing is that we all in life need people around us to sometimes point out where we are wrong. This is because we are all used to our own habits. We are all sometimes like fish swimming in the water who don't know what water is. That is, in fact, exactly what the Buddha said. He said our mind is sometimes so used to our habits that it's like a fish in the water. And as soon as you get the fish out of the water, it will struggle to get back in. In the same way, sometimes we find it hard to fix our habits. And it even starts with just seeing our own habits is already quite hard. So it's good to have spiritual friends around us that can be like a mirror to us, can be like a good comrade, can be like a good friend or a good mentor to us in helping us, guide us on the spiritual path. That's why it's important to come together. An online session like this one can help in that process. But it's even better if you have a physical place to go to where you can meet people and practice spiritual wisdom together, and then you can learn from one another. If you have a couple of people around you in your daily life, or maybe not your daily life, but in your life in general, if you have people around you that can help you and see when you're making a mistake and point that out, then you are very wealthy. Even if you are not a millionaire, you should consider yourself very wealthy, because many people in the world don't have that, don't have friends around them that can really help them forward on a spiritual path, and friends around them that dare to say when they are mistaken. So this is an important part, and that's why the Buddha said you should honor those places, those spiritual places, and honor those places where you come together. Then he says also that see to it that proper provision is made for the safety of arahants. Arahants normally means in the Buddhist text, it normally means enlightened disciples of the Buddha. But you can also see it as a more general word here, meaning good teachers, wise people that can help and contribute to society. So he says basically that if there are good teachers, then everybody should work together to give a place to those people, to make it easier for those people to live there in that community. So this is something I see very clearly in my own line of work, because I work as a secretary for this Buddhist temple in the Netherlands, where I'm calling from now. And here we can see that unlike Thailand, where it's very easy for a Buddhist monk to live, no matter where you're from, and even very easy for example, a Christian priest to live in Thailand. It's very easy to get a visa. Even if you are Christian, that means another religion than the religion of the country. Then if I compare that with the Netherlands, then you can see that in the Netherlands it's actually quite difficult for any religion to live here. Not just Buddhism, but also the religion of the country, that is Christianity. It's quite difficult for example, for an Indian person to become a Christian priest in the Netherlands, because you are not a person, or the same holds for a Thai monk. To become a monk to live here in the Netherlands is quite difficult. You have to get a visa, you have to get the right paperwork. It's quite more difficult. It's much more easier to just work for a company. So in a country like Netherlands, there isn't a lot of room for non-profit, and there is especially not much room for religion. There is a very strong separation of church and state, to the extent that it's very difficult for me to go to a public school, or for a public school to come to the temple, and to do that more often than maybe once every 5 years or so would be really strange. In fact, it's impossible for me to teach more than once a year in a public library, because of the strong separation of church and state. And the libraries are parts of the state in the Netherlands. So you can see that if people are not helping each other to give spirituality, give religion a chance, a place in society, then it's going to be like that. So it doesn't mean that we can't separate church and state, but there should be a room for it. In Belgium, they do this a lot better. In Belgium, Buddhism is not recognized in the law. This is not very good. But the religions that are recognized in the law are all taught in public schools. And yet it's not only in Belgium. You can see this also in Germany and in England, that there's still this tradition where the government feels responsible for the religion. And that is a very good thing. But it is not only about the government, it's also about taking care of each other. So if you see anybody who you think is wise, and it may also be another religion, then you should help each other to give a place, to give a room for that person. It may be a teacher, it may be a mentor, it may be a monk, or it may be a priest, or anybody. But we should be a person that is actually contributing to the wisdom of society, not to the delusion of society. So this is maybe a little bit abstract sometimes, these 7 points that I just have been teaching, but I hope you got something out of it. I think that it's very important to realize that whatever Buddhist teaching we talk about, it's always about these 3 things: training wisdom, training your ethics, and training the mind. And when we give these 3 trainings more room in society, then we can see that society will certainly improve. So if we summarize those teachings that I just mentioned, you can see that it's actually all about the Eightfold Path. The first 2 items are about developing discipline, developing ethics together. And the second 2 items are all about showing respect, developing wisdom. And then if I go to the last 3 items, then it's all about, just a moment. I think I just lost it. Oh, here it is. It's all about showing respect. So you can see that again in number 6 and number 7. But number 5 is more about having a kindness of heart and having patience and having not being led by too much by ambition and desires and things that are not wise. So it's about the training of the mind. So you can see that in these 7 items, you can find all the 3 trainings back again. The trainings that are very important in Buddhism: developing an ethical life, having the discipline to work together, to be harmonious, and taking care of your mind, and taking care of wisdom. And in that process, to also look deeply into any good traditions in your country, in your community, and also to really give a room, give a place in your own country, in your own community, for spirituality, for spiritual places and spiritual people, mentors. So that's all I would like to say about this ancient teaching in the Buddhist text. In summary, you could say that it's also about training your self-discipline, training patience, and training respect. And those are very important parts of the Buddhist path. That's all I would like to share with you today. And yeah, maybe this teaching proved some use to you in some shape or form. And now I would like to give you all a blessing for this first Saturday of the month. May you all find health, wealth, and wisdom in your life. May you always have good friends on your path. May you always find yourself in a harmonious community. And if you cannot find that community, may you be able to build it yourself. May you prosper in every lifetime and always carry yourself on the Buddhist path, following in the footsteps of the Buddhas and the great honorable teachers in every lifetime until Nirvana. Sadhu.